Before we invite Ajahn Brahm, I just thought I'll give you a brief introduction for those of you who are here for the first time for his talk. Ajahn Brahm resides in Perth, Australia. He's the abbot there, so he runs what he fondly calls it a monk factory. He's got about 22 monks from various countries, and 2 of them you had seen on television. One was from Norway, and the other one was American Vietnamese. He was born in England, where he grew up, and then went to Cambridge University and graduated with a degree in theoretical physics. After which, with his interest in Buddhism, he decided to sell off everything he had to go try out monastic life in Bangkok. So that's where he got ordained and later learned about Ajahn Chah, the great meditation teacher in the forest, and became his disciple and lived in Thailand for about 7 years before he was invited with another monk to set up the monastery in Serpentine, Australia. So he's our spiritual patron and ever so popular whenever he comes to Singapore. And I think some of you may have known about it through our newsletter, our emails, but how many of you found out about it through the newspaper? Then we know whether we should ever advertise again. Because if Straits Time is not well read, then we won't advertise. Okay. Anyway, those of you who are not members, we certainly invite you to join so that you will be kept up to date with all our new activities and upcoming program. And you can just pick up a form downstairs and sign up. It's only $30 a year. Okay, with that, if I may kindly invite all of you to put your hands together, and if it's, no, don't clap. If it's not too inconvenient, just stand up and put your hands together, and then we'd just like to show our respect in inviting Ajahn Brahm to the front. And you know, actually, you can clap because it makes him feel like a star. So go on. Thank you. That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay, please have a seat.
We have screams next time.
Oh, you have screams next time, he says. You know, in Colombo, after a Dhamma talk he gave, and I started to clap, and I realized I was the only one clapping. Because in Sri Lanka, nobody claps after a Dhamma talk. And he looks at all the Sri Lankans and says, she's from Singapore. Okay, now I'm sure there's a lot of politics in your life, if you're here tonight, supposedly both in your office and home, right, which is not unusual for any one of us. But why would we be asking a monk about, you know, politics and problems in relationship? They're supposed to have gone all away from all this and probably never worked in an office. But I think Ajahn Brahm is no ordinary monk. He can talk about anything. First of all, but actually running a monastery is like running an office of some sort. So perhaps we can invite you to say a few words to start off about what is actually politics in the, you know, in the way we use it so freely. Oh, there's politics in the office. Ah, there's politics at home. What would you say it is all about, this politics thing, and that causes relationship problems?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think a lot of times politics is just where we focus in any relationship, whether it's in an office or whether it's in a family or an organization or even a monastery, is when we focus on the wrong areas. We focus on what I need or what they need. And instead of in any institution, in any organization or family, what's most important is not what I want. What's most important is not what they want. What's most important is what we want. And so a lot of times I think the politics come when we either focus on the other or we focus on ourselves instead of focusing on the middle. And that's that middle way of Buddhism is by far the most effective. So instead of having arguments, we say, well, what do we need in our relationship? What do we need in our office? What are we trying to achieve? What's our goals? Not what's my goal, not what's your goal, what's our goals. And when we actually look at a community, and then I think we can realize that how cooperation is very important. I've mentioned this to our education ministers in Australia, because now I do get involved in some respects with politics, or rather with politicians, because politicians are serving our communities, they're serving our nations, and it's wonderful if we can avail them of like Buddhist principles. But some of those Buddhist principles is like learning just how to cooperate with each other. And one of the things with the education department, which I suggested, and I keep on pushing this idea around, at the moment all our schools encourage competition. And so we compete against each other in the classroom to get the best marks or to get average marks and to get the places in universities and maybe in jobs afterwards. But anybody should know that in real life your own personal achievement is important, but we also have to somehow encourage, and the best way of encouraging it is by rewards, cooperation. And so in order to do that, I suggested a long time ago something like the following, that in our schools and universities, when we have the end of the term marks, which we have to somehow grade our students, maybe 60-70% of our score should be our personal score, what we've achieved by ourselves. And the other 20-30%, 40% should be averaged over our whole class, our whole group, by which we would always be rewarding our ability to cooperate and work together. So if there was, say, in a class, some poorly behaving students, those who weren't scoring well in, say, maths or science, it will be in the interests of those who are the top of the class to help, to assist, to work with the weaker ones, because it would be their interest, they would be marked on their ability to cooperate and raise the whole level of the team. At the moment, the only teamwork which we encourage in our societies is on the sports field. But why can't we do that in our academic life as well? Because as you know, when you move in to an office, sometimes if it's competitive, in other words, I'm thinking of my own career and my own advancement, that goes against the best interest of the company at large. It goes against the best interest of the country. It goes against the best interest of our world. Competition is great, but we also need to reward somehow cooperation. And I think that's one of the reasons why what we call is politics in an office or in a family or in even a country is our inability to cooperate and always to be competing. I may get into trouble for this, but sometimes I admire the Singaporean system, simply because in the Western system it doesn't matter what the opposition says, you always disagree with it, even if it's a good idea. Because you're always competing with the other side for the next election. And I think that is not very good for the well-being and for servicing a country. We have to learn how to cooperate, not just to compete. We have to have a balance between competing and cooperation. And I really do feel that it's because of our education system and also because of the ethos of our societies is always on competition. And we really think that that's the only way forward. It's not the only way forward. You have to have cooperation as well. That's the strength of an office. But it's also the strength of a family as well. Because once you are living together in a small apartment or a small house, if you don't learn to cooperate, you're going to have a big arguments and big trouble. And every time you have an argument, you're not doing anything for the furtherance of your own happiness or the happiness and welfare of your family. You're basically wasting time. So we have to learn how to cooperate. And I'm going to mention something now which is very close to my mind, because yesterday I came from Sydney, and the reason I flew the evening flight from Sydney to Perth and the overnight flight to Singapore, where I arrived early this morning, The reason why I spent 2 days of very precious time in Sydney, because we had a meeting there of all the members of the different Buddhist traditions, the ordained members, what we call Sangha, both monks and nuns, not just from my tradition, Theravada, but the Chinese nuns, the Taiwanese nuns, the Korean monks, the monks in the Fo Guang Shan group, the Vajrayana monks, the Vietnamese monks, and all the nuns. Everybody was invited to have what we call the Australia Sangha Association. I wanted to call it the National Australia Sangha Association, just so we could have the very wonderful acronym NASA. I thought that sounded better than ASA, but nevertheless I was voted down. But the point was, we're forming an association. We are cooperating. Of course, our temples also compete, and I think that's healthy. It's great to have the Theravada temple right next door to the Mahayana temple, right next door to the Tibetan temple, because when we compete for market share, we have to up our game. We have to increase the way we present our goods. So competition, even between the three main traditions, is great. But we also have cooperation as well. And that cooperation means that in many areas we compete, which is healthy. But in so many other areas, it's something which is common to Buddhism. Let's put aside Buddhism, common to spirituality and truth and goodness, which we all agree on. And when we cooperate, it's amazing what we can do. So I think the politics which we have in our society, a lot of it comes from our inability to learn how to cooperate as well as compete, to have this balance between the two. It's good in your marriage that you have your own career, your personal goals, but that should always be balanced with learning how to cooperate and having something which is bigger than me. And what's bigger than me is called us.
Ajahn Brahm, everything you said makes sense.
Yeah, thank
it's
you.
It's very idealistic.
Now here we come. Go on.
But in the real world...
Ah, come on.
that you don't live in, we do. We are told that we have to look after ourselves. Like, you look after yourself because no one's here to look after you, whether you're in a company and even as you're growing up, if you've got lots of siblings. So, I think with that advice, then you tend to have to look after your own interest.
Looking after your own interest. I always look after other people's interests most of the time, and because I've been serving Singapore, the Buddhist Fellowship, and Buddhist Lodge for so long, it's amazing how many people look after me. I just was given some sweets. I had to tell a person I made a big mistake. When they gave me some sweets, I say, "Oh, those are the sweets I like." I thought, "Oh, why did I say that?" Because if they tell somebody else, I'm going to have so many sweets, they're going to kill me with diabetes. But why is that? Why do people like being kind to a monk? It's a lot of time because of selflessness, because you're concerned about other people. Other people want to look after you.
But as a monk, you're no threat to us.
Aha, good. So why don't you be no threat to your husband?
You're
no
celibate.
Threat to your wife. No threat. It is because our personal interests are challenged sometimes, and they're threatened. And because a lot of times we're looking at this wrong place. Again, going back to the politics, in my real world between the different Buddhist groups, which you see very clearly here in Singapore and other places in the world. Now, is there politics between the Mahayana, the Theravada, Hinayana, Vajrayana, Zen, all these other groups? And I said, look, listen, we've got so much in common. Why don't we just not look at each other, but look again what's between us? Because the two big mistakes in Buddhism is to think that Buddhism is sacrificing yourself for the sake of other beings. That's the Mahayana goal. I'm going to put off my own enlightenment, my own happiness, and I'm going to serve all other beings. May all other beings be happy and well. That is wrong. The Theravada so-called ideal Forget about other people, I'm going to look after myself and get enlightened. That is also wrong. Selfless compassion is wrong. Selfishness is wrong, and I'll tell you why. Selfish compassion is actually, selfless compassion is when we just look at the other person and we give to them. And many times in a family or in an office, especially in a family, sometimes, especially the wives, the women, will like sacrifice themselves for the husband, for the kids, for the family, for everything. That doesn't work, as many of you are finding out. Now, what's the alternative? Is the alternative the so-called Hinayana way, just thinking about your own concerns, looking after yourself? That too is wrong. There's a middle way between Hinayana and Mahayana, and this is the best yana of all. I've coined it the Hahayana. And that's it, you're laughing. So I'm a follower of the Hahayana. Now, what I really mean there is the third option between sacrificing yourself for others and being selfish is actually to focusing on the relationship you have, what's between me and the other. Now this is such an important point in life. It's also an important point in meditation. It's not thinking about yourself in a marriage. It's not thinking about the others in a marriage. It's thinking of what lies between us, because that is where marriage exists. Marriage is not the husband, not the wife, not the children. It's what unites all of those together. What's between them. And I think if we look there, it's not me, it's not them. It's this us business. It's this we. And so as in the real world, okay, you might think you just live in a monastery and everything gets given to you and you're very happy, you don't have to worry about the rest of the world. That is not true. I am completely dependent upon you guys. If you didn't feed me, and if you didn't take me back, I'd have to walk. I've got no money, I can't afford a bus or a taxi. I am completely dependent upon you. You know something, you're completely dependent upon me as well. It's all about us. This is like the synergy which we have in any community. Well, and one of the problems about politics is not seeing the big picture. And the big picture is always about us. Recently, I gave this simile of the forest in our monasteries. When I first moved to Australia 22 years ago, it was in a eucalypt forest, a special type of hardwood called jarrah. And because of the problems with the environment, there's a disease, a fungus, which is attacking those trees called dieback. And so many trees had already died. When I first moved to this forest, I wanted to cut down all those dead trees because they were ugly, they were like skeletons. I was stopped by someone who said, do you realize what you're doing? In those dead trees, there's holes which form the habitat for possums, for potoroos, these little marsupials in that area. This is where the birds make their nests. These dead trees are part of the forest, they're part of the ecosystem. If you cut those down, you'll be damaging the balance of the forest. When I heard that and understood that, I realized my mistake. And not just a mistake with those dead trees, the trees which were diseased, old, ugly, the ones which were laying dead on the forest floor. I realized that every one of those was an important part of the forest. I understood that what I didn't like was important to the balance of that forest. It was necessary, it was essential to the life and health of the place where I lived. And from that, I made the extension to say, in any office, relationship, country, everybody has a place, has a value. Those dead trees, those ugly trees, those sick trees, our world would not be the same without them. We need the old people, we need the sick people, we even need the criminals in our society. This is a radical thing to say. They are part of the ecosystem called life. In the same way, in your family, in your family situation, all of those irritating little things which sometimes are a source for the politicking in a society. That's important for your growth, adds a texture to your family life, because without those arguments which you have with your loved ones, there would not be the opportunity to say sorry and ask forgiveness. It's one of the things which I learnt from my parents. They did have arguments. Sometimes they turned around and they wouldn't speak to each other, for a few hours. But the wonderful thing about, I remember with my mother and father, it would only last for a couple of hours, they would make up. They'd make sure they made up in front of myself and my brother. And we saw them sort of say sorry to each other, to kiss and hug. And because I saw that, I learned two important things. That arguments are part of life. But I also found that there's a way to end those arguments. And I saw that in front of me by just like a hug and a kiss and saying, it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. You're my husband, you're my wife. That's important. Let's make up. I saw that's the end of the politicking, when we see there's something more important than our differences. There's something more important about what tradition you are from, or even what religion you are, what race you are, what company you are working for. There's something more important than that. It's great to have those arguments. That keeps us on our toes. It's great to have competition with Malaysia here in Singapore, with Indonesia, but there comes a time when we also cooperate and have this wonderful friendship. And I think that is what I mean by the forest simile. All these things which sometimes we try and get rid of with our so-called politicking, that's part of life. So if you have someone in your office who's really giving you a hard time, who's always on your back, always trying to get your job, next time you go and see them, say, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being so irritating, because you're teaching me patience. Thank you so much for being so competitive, because you're making me raise my game. Thank you so much, for being just this awful, rotten person, because you help me see the awful and rottenness in myself as well. So you can actually appreciate some of the things you have to deal with in life, and that is the real world. So in my monastery, when there's somebody like that in our monastery, it's always creating problems, I say we give them a special name. We call them Ajahn.
That's your name.
Yeah, but we know what Ajahn means? It means teacher. So whoever's really irritating, who really gets up your nose and gives you a very, very hard time, call them Ajahn. And give them respect, because they're teaching a very important lesson in life. Go on.
Ajahn.
Yes, Ajahn Anji.
You said that between a husband and wife there's something in between them, and that's what we usually call love. But the kind of love that we seem to practice are very conditional. Yeah. There's a transaction involved, right? And it's also a situation that it's the hardest person to forgive when they have hurt you.
Correct.
So
the hardest person to
forgive,
the one you're most critical of, is the one which is closest to you. Have you ever noticed that people would like to create harmony in the world? The Anglicans are working very, very hard to get some harmony with the Catholics. At the same time, the Anglicans are having huge rifts amongst their own sects. You may notice maybe the Theravada might like to sort of make some more friendship with the other Buddhist groups, but amongst themselves, they never get on. You can understand that when it's somebody very close to us, that's where we're the most critical. In your profession, whatever your profession is, you may be very tolerant of other professions, but within your profession, people have got slightly different views than you, really irritate you. It's what's really close to us. What's very, very close is always where we get the most friction. If they're far apart, we don't really rub up against each other too much. and they're very, very close. They're challenging what we call our attachments and the ways of looking at things. So it's true that sometimes that your partner in life, they're the ones you always argue with. But you know one of the reasons why? Because they're so important to you. If they weren't so important to you, there wouldn't be any point arguing with them. They're very, very important to you. You made a commitment to them because they're so important to you. This is why you invest all this energy in those arguments. Because you think it's really worthwhile. The point is that sometimes we don't know how to argue. If you can have an argument with your partner, please, please, please choose the right time and place to make it really effective. Timing is the essence in life. And the timing should be as follows. If you have an issue you wish to talk about with your partner, do not talk about it when they just come home from work having just fought through the traffic. If you really have an issue, take them out to dinner. If you're a girl, dress up. If you're a bloke, you put a suit on. And take her out to the best restaurant, what you think she likes. Have as many courses as you possibly can have. It's called softening them up. And when you get to the final course, you find that your husband, your wife, whatever it is, they're just so soft, so mellow. You can talk about anything with them, and they'll listen. It's all in preparation. That's why in politics, when we have visitors from overseas, what do? They soften them up, first of all. Take them out to see this and see that, get them a nice dinner. When they're nice and soft, then they hit them with whatever they need to hit them with. Because it's just psychology. When you make that person feel that you're not attacking them, you're not their enemy, but you have friendship. You've got to establish that friendship and rapport first of all, before you can talk about something. So a lot of times, even if there's any problems in a monastery, just put it aside first of all, and get friendship happening first of all. When there's friendship, when there's compassion, when there's this mutual respect, you find you can talk about anything. Without that mutual respect, one listens. All the conflicts in the world occur from lack of mutual respect and concern. If Mr. Bush could show some concern, real concern for the Islamic world, and the Islamic world can respect Mr. Bush, with that respect there's possibility for movement and for finding a solution. Not to my problem, not to your problem, but to our problem. It's always an our problem. We don't live in isolation anymore. That's the clearest thing in our modern world. What happens in Iraq affects Singapore, economy-wise, let alone seeing all the images on the TV screen. Even what happens in Bolivia affects Australia. We are just one little planet. We have to learn how to get on. It is our problem, whatever happens anywhere on this globe. So, we cannot just ignore this. We have this mutual respect for all beings, this great compassion in Buddhism and in all religions. All beings deserve to be part of the forest. So let's listen to each other, respect each other, and actually then, for that respect, for that friendship, then there's dialogue, then there's listening. But the friendship has to be established first. So in a monastery, if there's a couple of monks having a hard time, you soften them up first of all. You find out what they like and you get someone to bring that dish to them that day. So they're really happy. All my monks, because I tell all these stories and all my monks listen to these, they know if they want to ask any special privilege from me, they look what's given that day for the meal, and if they know it's something I like, I'm going to be in a good mood, they can ask anything, I'll say yeah. Look, just like any other relationship. Look at your husband, look at your wife. You've been living with them for so long, you should be able to tell when they're in a good mood. When they're in a good mood, you can ask for anything. So soften them up first of all. Same as your boss. Soften them up and then ask for a raise.
Before I ask the next question, can we invite all the people who are standing to come up and fill up the space in the middle,
Oh, in
and
front,
also
over here, yeah.
come up in the front, because you might be blocking some people in the back, and also it's going to be a long night if you're standing up. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Ajahn Brahm,
Yeah, go on.
when you're living with someone or seeing someone every day, their faults are very obvious, right? To the point that actually you see a lot more faults in the people that you're with than you see the good side of them after a while. So, I mean, how do you overcome that? Because it's so natural for the mind to keep seeing the faults of people.
Again, this is a problem, seeing the faults within people. This is the problem of the competitive attitude. Where we're competing, we're trying to be better, it's called ego, trying to be the best. Instead of actually trying to up our game, we try and pull other people down. That's actually competition. It's called mudslinging in politics, when instead of actually praising ourselves, we actually put down the opposition. And that happens in marriage, that can happen in religion. We never actually praise Buddhism. We just, that other mob down the road there, with the cross, they're terrible, they're awful. We put them down. Now that is wrong. We should never do that. Instead of actually putting down anybody, actually let's up our game. Let's praise rather than find fault. This is our nature. We've been conditioned to be fault finders, so we have to condition ourselves to be more respectful. For the many years, because I am an abbot, I have to manage my monastery. It's almost like I'm married to my monastery. So every time I'd go to that monastery, I'd see all the things which needed to be done, all the things which were wrong, the things which needed to be fixed. It was like you see your wife, your husband, all the things which are wrong with them. When I realized I was doing that, it's a natural thing if you're a manager, if you're trying to get some advancement in your marriage, in your office, in your country, or in your monastery. I realized that was not a good thing to do, especially when people would come and say, "You've got a wonderful monastery, it's so beautiful." I said, "What? Can't you see all the mistakes?" It's the same way that some people say, "You've got a wonderful husband, he's such a nice guy." What? Are you blind? But what I did, I said, I want to see my monastery the way that visitors see it. So see if you can see your wife, not as you see her, as her friends see her. To see your husband as his colleagues see him, not as you see him. And so to do that, I made this resolution that every Monday morning, because the weekend was really, really busy, I used to have a free morning on Monday, I'd say, I'm going to walk around my monastery with the eyes of a visitor. I'm not the abbot anymore. I don't own this monastery. I was thinking I'm not even living here. I'm going to see it as a visitor sees it. Not an owner, but just someone who's there for the time being. And I started seeing all this amazing beauty in the monastery, just how wonderful it looked. Instead of seeing what was needing to be fixed, I saw all that had already been fixed. I saw all the hard work which had gone into that monastery over those 21, 22 years. When I saw all the beauty, the sacrifice, the hard work, finances, wow, that was really an impressive monastery. I started to see it as a visitor could see it. If you look at your partner in life, all of their struggle since they were a small kid, how hard they've worked through school, the challenges they've had in life, just getting by, growing up, meeting you in the first place. Relationships are not difficult to make, let alone keep. The amount of work that person has done, how hard they've tried. Wow, you see that and you can respect your husband in a way you've never respected them before. You see something in your wife, just how hard she has tried. Not perfect, but she's done a damn good job in a way she's really tried to survive in this life, to do well at school, to get a job, trying hard for her family, for her kids, for you as well. And you see that, wow, you just want to give her a big hug, say thank you. So you're seeing my monastery as a visitor sees it. Sees your partner not as you see her, but as someone else would see her. It just opens your eyes. When we're so close to something, we can't see it properly. It's called the problem. This is a simile I haven't given here for many years now. How big is my hand? You know how big my hand is? It's so big now I can't see any of you. Now all I can see is my hand at the moment. Is it my hand's fault, or is it because I'm too close to it? If I put my hand where it belongs, which is at the end of my arm, sure, I can see my hand. I'm not in denial about the existence of my hand, but I can also see every one of you in this room. Now this is one of the times we have problems. We see a fault in our partner or a fault in life. It's not the fault's problem. It's just sometimes we put it in the wrong place. It's right up here. And that's all we can see, the fault. And we can see nothing else in our partner. We can see nothing else in our life. Why is it that many of our young people commit suicide? All they can see is what's wrong. It's true that things are wrong, but you have to get what's wrong and put it out here somewhere, please. So you can see, yeah, that is wrong. You have failed to get into university. You have lost your job. You have got a broken heart. But the broken heart is here. There's lots more in the world other than your broken heart. If your broken heart's right up here, you want to kill yourself, because that's all you can see. So a lot of times, problem solving is just getting perspective. The arguments with your husband is just moving backwards to see him, to see her if it's with a wife, as other people see them. Getting perspective. It's not so close to you anymore. It's out here somewhere. If you can do that, it's amazing what you can do just with the whole of life.
Ajahn Brahm, if you had a wife, which we know you don't, and you see her every day, isn't it hard after a while to really just, ignore the faults? I mean, what is some practical recommendations? Like, do you take holidays apart from each other?
The practical recommendations are you come to the Buddhist lodge to hear talks like this. Because those faults, they started out as charming. It's so charming the way you pick your nose, my darling. Whatever it is. It's amazing, because the faults, they're actually what makes life beautiful. Because of Perth in Western Australia, we have an ocean to the westward of our city there. So we have these amazing sunsets in the evening over the Indian Ocean. But you only have those beautiful sunsets when there's a few clouds on the horizon. Some faults, some defects in the clarity of the sky, because only those clouds will spread the colours, the beautiful crimsons and orange along the horizon, to give these amazing sunsets. Without those faults, there would be no beauty. There's no beauty in perfection. There's no life just in perfection either. Life is this balance, this yin and yang between perfection and imperfection, between the happiness and the suffering, between the arguments and the love. That is life. It's not the love which is between us, because you know that sometimes that's not there at all. What's in between us is something else. I'd say even something greater than us, greater than life, greater than love. And that's truth. Because truth sometimes metamorphoses into this beautiful love, and sometimes it's argument. Both are part of life. Greater than love, greater than arguments, called life, truth. So if you can actually value that, the arguments are important. So don't think that something has gone wrong in our relationship. That is part of your relationship. It's part of monastic life, having monks who sometimes don't get on with each other. But you guys are going to live together. It's a wonderful thing in the monastic tradition that if you ordain together, you will sit next to each other for the rest of your life. because we always sit according to the hierarchy of how long we've been ordained. So it's great to ordain two people who don't get on together right next to each other. And sure enough, they do learn to get on together. It's just nature. When you have to, you will. So, if you're having an argument with your husband, the best thing to do is I'll get a room, I'll lock you in there for 3 months. Together. So you really can't get away from each other. I think getting a time out, well, I think that might be something a bit too easy. Go closer together. Don't go apart. If you have an argument, don't run away. Run towards the problem. Don't run away from it.
Whether in family or at work, you have jealousies, right? Whether it's siblings or relatives or whoever. Or at work would be jealousy of your colleague getting promoted or getting more bonus or whatever that could be. What is the Buddhist approach to dealing with jealousy?
Well, actually, the Buddha mentioned this, and he gave this beautiful quality called mudita, which is the complete opposite of jealousy. Jealousy always comes from competing. Mudita, which is like sympathetic joy. When you rejoice at somebody else's success, and you have that quite naturally. If you see someone who's just won the lottery on the TV, don't you feel happy for them? Do you ever think, why did they win the lottery and not me? It's unfair. When you actually go to a marriage and you see this young couple, they're in love, they're daft and stupid about each other, don't you feel just wonderful about that, even though it's not you? There's a natural quality in a human being which can delight in the happiness of others. And that is encouraged in Buddhism. To rejoice in other people's success. So if somebody else actually gets that promotion, wow, well done. You really deserve that. Thank you so much, for inspiring me with what you've done. All it needs is to be encouraged in our world, to rejoice in other people's success. It actually stops our ego, and it means that we are successful now, that we rejoice together. So when one person is successful, it's actually not one person anymore. It's the same if somebody in Singapore wins a gold medal in the Olympics. The whole of Singapore is happy, aren't they? We all rejoice if Singapore wins the Tiger Cup last time I was here?
Oh, that's right,
Soccer.
yes, the soccer, yes.
Yeah, that was in the newspapers last time I was here. Everyone rejoices. So
that's because we don't know them. But, but in an office, you know your colleague, and he or she didn't work as hard as you, and probably sucked up to the boss, and because of that, he got promoted, not because he was more hardworking. That makes you feel really lousy.
There you are now. I think if you get promoted, you have to work harder. So it's great. True, isn't it? So, if you wanted it, you've got it. You're stuck with it.
But even in families, children feel this favoritism, right? Oh, my mom loves my brother more than me. Yeah. Maybe because I'm a girl. How do you get over that? Because you feel it's not fair. It's like, all right, I'm born a woman this life, but I never asked for it.
Didn't you?
I was just asking for someone else.
Okay. Sometimes, again, that jealousy is always to do with me. And it's better for the whole family. If somebody else gets love from the mother, it's wonderful. I can actually stand back and see this beautiful relationship with like a son and his mother. Oh, it's wonderful to see that. I get inspired. So you never think about yourself. You think about the family, what's good for the family. So I think a lot of times that jealousy is, again, looking at the wrong place. So looking at me. We are getting the self-generation. When psychology always says to look after your own interests, make your own goals, go for your own goals, compete, work for yourself, do it your way, my way. That independence may be a balance for when we are too part of a bigger group. We're not focusing too much on our own needs, but it can go too far, lead to the jealousy, lead to me, what I need, and stop this balance of an usness. It can also go the other way, being too self-sacrificing, too self-effacing, not standing up for yourself, just thinking about the others. It always has to go to us. What's actually beneficial for the whole family, for us? So if a mother is giving too much attention, say, to one of the siblings, it's not good for the whole family. So it's not a personal thing, it's an our thing.
Yeah, but you can't change mother, right?
Sure you can.
All right.
Or you can't change the person, but you can brainwash her, you can change her, when you know how to work with mothers. My mother said that I must have been a Buddhist in many previous lives, because he used to say I could twist around my little finger. Because, children do manipulate their parents. Of course they do. They know how to get their own way from their parents, the right way to ask things. And so this is also the right way to actually, not to manipulate, but to get what's best for us.
Can you teach us a little bit more?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, to realize that because we are a family, because we are all going together, we have to work together. That is paramount, the togetherness. Because look, if you think you can live alone, how many people are looking for a partner in life? And living alone, sometimes people get all sorts of psychological problems. Health problems, suicidal problems, other problems. Sometimes if you don't have a partner, at least you've got your friends, your friend network, which is also important. As a monk, I've got my monk network. So they're my family. So, you're emotionally satisfied just by serving you guys, my fellow monks, looking after them. Those last two monks who came here, Venerable Bhamali and Kemavaro, I call them my babies, because I ordained them as monks, and so now they're coming up and they're becoming adult monks now, serving, and just like any mother, I feel I'm their mother, and now they're doing all these wonderful things. I feel so proud of them. So I get a lot of emotional happiness from these. But we don't have any jealousy. If those two monks do so well in Singapore, that after a while people say, who's coming next week? So Ajahn Brahm, no, I've heard of his jokes, I'm not coming to him. Bhamali, yeah, we'll come to his talk. If they do much better than me, and they become the star teachers, I'll be so happy. I can just stay and have a nice time resting and not do anything. So no jealousy. It's actually sympathetic joy. I feel so happy that people make it in the world and they do wonderful things.
Ajahn Brahm, what do you do in your monastery then if you had two monks who have problems getting along with each other because they just can't stand the sight of each other?
If I have two monks who can't stand the sight of each other, I try and arrange to give them jobs. They have to work with each other every day. So no, there's no escape. They have to work it out. But one of the great things is that human beings are so resourceful. If they have to, they will. And this is a great thing with human beings. If they have to work together, they do work together. And this is one of the stories in my little book. It's a great story about one of the early disciples, a Canadian girl who was living in Perth and married to an engineer. They were visiting from Toronto on a contract for 2 years in mining. When the contract had finished, they had to go back to Canada. Instead of buying airline tickets, they sold their house and they bought a boat, a little yacht. Their idea was, instead of flying to Toronto, they would sail. They were young, without kids, a trip of a lifetime. And when they got to Vancouver, BC, in Canada, they'd sell their yacht, they'd have their money for their next house. It was a great idea, and also a great adventure for young people. They needed some help, so they teamed up with another couple, who were also going to Canada. So there was two couples, two husbands, two wives. When she got to Toronto, she wrote to me, and one of the stories she told on the voyage I've used in my book, and I've used in many stories about politics. Because what happened here, in the middle of the voyage, somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, hundreds of miles from land, there was trouble in the engine room. Just the engine wouldn't work. And there was no wind, so the boat was stuck. The two ladies were on deck, because they didn't know anything about engines, reading magazines. The two men were in this small engine compartment, which was very cramped, very hot, and if ever you try to fix up an engine, sometimes it's so frustrating. Sometimes even little things like getting a nut loosened from its bolt, sometimes it's just so hard it just doesn't want to get loosened. Sometimes when it is loosened, the thing falls in the most greasiest recess, so you can't get it out again. And you put it together again, it still doesn't work. Fixing up engines can be so irritating and frustrating. And this was one of those occasions. They were in there for a few hours, they couldn't get the problem fixed, and because of the heat and the irritation, they started to take the frustrations out on each other, just like in a marriage. First of all, it was just like snide remarks, little put-downs, and that soon led to an argument. The argument soon raised in its intensity until they were shouting at each other. And then it got so furious they were hurling really unfair insults at each other, cursing each other. And at that point, one of the men threw down their wrench and said, "Right, that's it, I'm leaving." And this apparently was a true story. That man was so mad with rage, he went to his cabin, washed, changed, packed his bags, and appeared on deck with his bags in his best suit. And it was only the laughter of the two girls that he realized there was ocean all around him as far as he could see. There was nowhere to go. And at that, this man went red in the face and did what the only thing he could do was go back to his cabin, change back into his work clothes, go back into the engine compartment and help out. They finished the voyage the best of friends. That's how conflicts are solved. It would be great if we could put Mr. Sharon and Mr. Abbas in a room together. Don't let them out until they come to a compromise.
From the sounds of the Ajahn Brahm, it seems like sometimes having choices is not the best thing when it comes to dealing with conflicts.
Sometimes the choices, we always take the easiest choice rather than the long-term best choice. Choices can be very confusing sometimes. And a lot of times when we take a choice, we take it out of fear. So this is why in life you have to be courageous. So this is why I said instead of running away from the problem, you run towards the problem. You face it with courage. And say, this is important. This is my marriage, my family, my work, my country, my planet is important. So let's face these challenges which we have. Face them square on. I remember one of Ajahn Chah's disciples, who I got to know later on, was an ex-Prime Minister of Thailand. It was Dr. Sanya Thammasat. I think he's passed away a few years ago. I lost touch with him, but I think his son is now the Minister for Religious Affairs in Thailand, I believe. But anyway, that he used to come and visit Ajahn Chah very regularly. I remember him saying to me, he was Prime Minister for a short while, he said that there's never any problem in government I cannot solve when I go and see my opponent, my enemy, just the two of us, and I put my hand on his knee, which is an expression of friendship. We talk about it. When I heard that from him as a young monk, I was very impressed, because this was someone who lived in the real world as a prime minister of a modern country. And he said he could solve those problems through friendship, which is that mutual respect, the opening up to say, it's not your problem, my friend. It's not my problem. It's our problem. We're stuck together, whether it's in the boat of our little family or the boat of our country. Singapore's not that big. And our planet's not that big either. Basically, where can we go to? There's the ocean of space surrounding us. We have to learn how to live together. These bombs are getting bigger and more violent. Can we afford to have some crazy maniac with a nuclear bomb exploding it somewhere? If we don't solve our problems together, what future is there for life on this planet? What future is there for you if you can't live with this person you've already got? Sometimes you think if you trade them in, you can get somebody better. But one thing I will tell you, those people who've been married many times, all husbands are the same, basically. All wives are the same. You may look at slightly different hairstyle, slightly different face, but they're basically the same. So the one you're with is as good as you're going to get. So why don't you make the best of that? And you can make the best of it because it's not the husband, it's not the wife, it's not who they are which is the problem. It's how we relate to them, what's in between us. That's the problem.
But Ajahn Brahm, what if it's someone who's dishonest, who lacks integrity, who's full of himself? I mean, how do you put up with someone like that? I mean, how do you respect someone like that?
So this evil person, they're dishonest, they are selfish. So instead of actually looking at their problem, instead of seeing it's my problem, why don't say it's our problem? So it's not the fact that...
But you can get rid of him.
Sorry? Where can they? They don't just... If you get rid of them, you get somebody worse coming next. This is actually the problem about putting people in prisons. Thinking that somehow or other we can put them away somewhere, out of sight, out of mind, and thinking that therefore we're solving the problem. And I think everyone knows when a person goes to a prison, they're going to come out again sooner or later. If they die in prison, they get reborn again as Buddhists. They're going to come back. So unless we actually solve the problem, it's not just putting them away or even executing them. There's a problem there. And it's not their problem, it's our problem. We have to do something about this. So when there is the recognition of where the problem lies, then somebody's lying, someone is being selfish. When it's my problem, as well as not my problem, it's our problem, then I have a job to do something about that. Why do you think I'm in Singapore now? I live in Perth. What's Singapore got to do with me? I know it's Australia's problem. It's Singapore's problem. Singapore's problem is Australia's problem. It is our problem. That's why I'm a Buddhist monk. Not just to solve my problems, not just to get enlightened by myself, to realize there's a whole commitment here to do something about the problems of life, because if someone is hurt over in, say, Africa, that hurts me. Maybe I can close my eyes for a few moments. If I see some kid having his hand chopped off by these militia gangs, I can't just say, that's nothing to do with me. I've got a responsibility. That hurts me. I've got a responsibility. I've got to do something. It's not their problem. Even though I'll probably never go to that country, I care. As each one of you do care. Because of that compassion for all sentient beings, which Buddha recognized, that's not something we say, may all sentient beings be happy and well, thinking that we're making compassion. What we're doing when we say, may all sentient beings be happy and well, is affirming a compassion which already exists in us. It's there already. We're making it clear to ourselves. So because of that, we have to help So someone who's lying all the time, I want to find out why. Find out some mechanisms or some way of healing that problem. So I go out and teach. I write books. I write about forgiveness. The fact that you can forgive anything. Because in that forgiveness, that acknowledgement and the forgiving and the learning from what we've done is the growth. So I say to anyone who's lied to me, you're forgiven. Straight away. Doesn't matter. You can still be my friend even though you've lied to me. If something happens there with a person, when you're actually so soft and trusting to somebody else, they don't think they want to lie to you anymore. This is what I found with visiting prisons. These were some tough monsters in these jails. But when I actually respected them, it's amazing the change which happened. Sometimes people would ask, how could you look at a rapist like that? We have something in Buddhism we call Buddha nature. Every being has Buddha nature. What does that mean? It means every being has this core of purity, of goodness, of compassion inside of them. If you can see that in another being and focus on that, then they deserve forgiveness. Because you're forgiving a future Buddha. All one needs to do is not focus on the faults and mistakes. Focus on their potential, their Buddha nature inside. Because the first step in forgiveness, and it's a crucial step, before you forgive somebody, you have to see something in them which is worthy of forgiving, which actually qualifies them for your forgiveness. If you've had an argument with your husband or with your wife, you can't see anything good in them. There's no way you can actually have any reconciliation there. You've got to actually go back and just look for the goodness in your husband, their Buddha nature. It doesn't matter if they're a Christian or a Muslim. No, Buddha nature is just this idea, this potential for goodness and purity. If you see that in the other person, you can see something to respect. And then you can forgive. Forgive their faults out of respect for their innate goodness. And once I started doing that in prisons, you started not seeing the person's crime, but seeing their goodness. I realized there's no such thing in this world as a criminal. There's only people who have done crimes. There's a great difference between criminals and people who have done crimes. A criminal is branded for life, or many lives. A person who's done crimes is a person first. The acts are secondary. In the same way, there's no such thing as a terrorist. There's people who do terrorist acts. What that means is if somebody has done some awful act, they're more than that crime, they're more than that act. There's something else in there. There's a Buddha nature, some goodness in there, which you can focus on that. There's a way forward in rehabilitation and growth. When I did that to these prisoners, or rather these people who had done a criminal act, when I recognized something beautiful inside of them, then they also recognized that. When I saw it, and I respected them, then they saw that someone actually respected them. Why? And they saw it themselves. And from that place of respect, seeing their goodness, then rehabilitation started. Some of these prisoners became really good guys. And because of that, look, this is one thing which happened, a very beautiful story. Did I tell the story of the prisoners who went to the school last time? This actually made me cry the last time I told this story. Might do it again. It's a beautiful story. I was teaching in this meditation in this prison, and on one day I turned up a little bit earlier. One of the prisoners, his name was Nick, was waiting for me. He grabbed me by the arm without telling me why, and he pulled me towards the schoolroom in the prison to look at the board. And on the board were all these greeting cards, handmade greeting cards done by children in a local primary school. He told me why these cards were there and why he couldn't wait for me to see them. A local primary school wanted to help the children in their school with the danger of drugs. I'm not sure if this is the case in Singapore, but in countries like Australia, in Europe and United States, our children are exposed to drugs even in primary school. High school, certainly. And the parents, or rather the teachers, the headmaster, the principal, wanted to try and do something before it was too late. So the principal contacted the education department. Can we have something for our kids to tell them about the danger of drugs? And after a while, the education got back to them and said, there's this professor in this university, there's this lecturer there who you can invite to come and give a talk. And the principal, bless her, said, no. These are people who have studied it but don't know the guts of what happens in drugs. They had this great inspiration to get a couple of experts, real experts. They invited a couple of prisoners who are in jail for crimes of dealing drugs. Nick was one of them, one of my meditation students. I praise that principal and the governor of that jail for having the guts to do this. I think it was kept secret at the time because some press would get in there and say, you are exposing our children to these criminals, to the scum. They're going to corrupt our kids. That's not what happened. Nick and his friends spent a whole day at this primary school telling class after class what happens, what really it is like when you take that first puff of the marijuana joint, what it's like when you inject that heroin in your arm, and what happens next, and next, and when to feed your habit you go selling that stuff to others, when you see some of your friends die of overdoses, when you see them steal to feed their habit, when you see people die at a young age, you see your girlfriends turn to prostitution, you see lives ruined. When they talk from the heart like that, I can imagine just what that would have done to these kids. Everybody responds to truth, to real honesty. I knew how those kids reacted because I could see that on the cards. Dear Nick, thanks so much. I'll never take drugs. Signed, Mabina. Dear Nick, thanks for doing this. Please visit us when you next come out. Signed, Jessica. Dear Dick, hope it's not so bad for you in the prison. Hope your sentence finishes soon. Signed, Charles. Just card after card of the kids saying what it meant to them to have two prisoners who knew from their own bitter experience what it was like. Not some expert, from a university, but someone who'd been there, felt it, and had been hurt. And as he was saying this, Nick was weeping, as he was pointing to card after card after card of these little kids who had opened their heart out to a man who'd made some big mistakes in his life, and now had done something to heal the harm which he had made. And I did see Nick a couple of years later. I was at the airport in Perth. Someone put their hand on my left shoulder. I turned around. It was Nick in a very good suit. He's obviously doing very well. His first words, "I'm still meditating, Brahm, I'm still meditating," he said. That was a classic, beautiful win-win situation when drugs wasn't their problem, the people in jail. It was our problem. And two people who committed drug crimes, children who hadn't faced that test yet, came together. The children, I was sure, would have been equipped better than any other children in the whole of Australia to resist. And those prisoners realised it was more to them than their crime. They'd actually done something beautiful and good. And that's why they got on with their life once they were released and became probably not just good citizens, but probably excellent citizens. That's how we solve problems. Innovative, courageous, in a way which faces the problem square on and solves them. When we realise it's not the prisoner's problem, it's not the kid's problem, it's our problem. We work together.
Ajahn Brahm, it seems that when you're emotionally charged, it's a lot harder to see things objectively because you're emotionally tangled with the situation or with the person. And you seem to have always clarity and calmness which allows you to see things as they are. Perhaps is that to do with the meditation practice? And if so, I mean, what would you recommend to lay people in practicing meditation?
Yeah, it's just, and when you say no emotions there, I was almost crying when I was telling the story. I do get emotional. But my emotions are these inspiration emotions, loving kindness emotions. When I see something really beautiful, I allow myself just to feel them in the heart. I don't resist them at all. Because that inspiration, the beauty of the heart, when even a man, a monk, feels like crying for something so beautiful and so wonderful, it uplifts me. So with emotions, we all have those emotions. Don't be some sort of robot, someone who never feels. That's not being a human being. It's those negative emotions, that's what you mean. And those negative emotions, they always come because we just think of ourselves or them. We don't look in the right place. So this is relationships, and this is what I've been talking about all evening. It's not them. It's not sort of, the murderers, the criminals. It's not our enemies. It's not that person in the office. Don't look there. Don't look about me. Look about what's between us. It's the us problem. And that's with politics. We have to work together. A bit of competition is great, because in that argument, in that robust debate, we get further. That's why I told Angie, I love Angie to ask me these questions, and really probe me. You're being too soft. Because in that robustness of debate, challenging, you get much deeper into truth. But there's also that sort of cooperation as well, which is so important in life, which is looking at what we have together, what's in our interest. And it's in our interest, to solve the problem of drugs. And let's get the drug addicts involved in this. It's our interest to stop terrorism. Let's get the terrorists involved in this. Stop putting them away in jails and forgetting about them. They are part of the problem. We are part of the problem. They're all part of the solution. So it's just looking at innovative ways. And I think it's maybe because, as a Buddhist monk, it's almost like the meditation allows you to push aside all those narrow constraints of thinking. Because when you're very peaceful and still, you can see things in different strange ways. But it's not just meditation. I was saying this earlier to someone, it's also being playful in your life. And I learned this as a scientist at Cambridge. Because they said, if you're going to be a research scientist, get your equipment, play with it first of all. Play around for fun. Because in that play, not only are you familiarizing yourself with the equipment, but sometimes in that play, you're discovering new angles on science, almost by mistake. That playfulness is opening yourself up to what's happening, joyfully researching, investigating, what's there in front of you. That playfulness is important. And anyone who's visited my monastery can see my monks are very playful. And I've encouraged that deliberately. You see, I'm sometimes playful as well, even though I'm a 53-year-old man. Never lose your playfulness, your ability just to enjoy the moment and see the ridiculous nature in the moment. In that playfulness and in that calmness, that's where you find new solutions to the problems. And that's where you get clarity. Sometimes it'd be great in our parliaments if we told more jokes. I mean that simply because in that laughter there's togetherness, because we all laugh together. And secondly, there's that short-circuiting of our old ways of thinking to see things anew. There's a lot of creativity comes in play. And I think that's something as adults we get far too serious, even on the bench. Sometimes it'd be great if the judges would actually wear their wigs the wrong way around or something. I don't know what it is, but something to take away the gravitas, at times, not always obviously, the gravitas, to be able to see things in a different way. And that way I think we can get creativity. And that create creative solutions to problems. It is wonderful. For example, I wanted to say this today because this came up last week. I said I was going to mention this point. A couple of weeks ago, in the newspapers, you may have all read it, that the Marines in Guantanamo Bay were accused of flushing a book of the Quran down the toilet. So someone asked me, what do you think about that, Ajahn Brahm? What would you have done if someone had flushed like a holy book of Buddhism, say the Dhammapada, down the toilet? And being quite creative without any pause, I said, I'll probably call a plumber. What do you think? It's an obvious answer, isn't it? I'm a very practical monk, but I went further than that. I say, look, you can flush as many Buddhist books as you like down the toilet, but I will never let you flush Buddhism down the toilet. I will never allow you to flush peace, forgiveness, harmony, my respect for you down the toilet. Because isn't that what the books are all about? The books are the messengers. You can flush the messenger down the toilet as many times as you like. The Buddha statue is a messenger. It's there for a purpose. It's teaching us something. You can blow that Buddha statue up, but I'll not allow you to blow the message of the Buddha up. So just as what happened at Bamiyan, you can blow those Buddha statues up, but I'll never allow you to blow up my peacefulness, my tolerance, my friendliness, my brotherhood and sisterhood to you. So that's actually, we preserve what those books or what those icons, what those temples are all about. Please excuse me, the owners of this temple, you can blow this temple up, but please don't allow Buddhism or peace and truth, kindness, forgiveness to be blown up. That's more important. That's what this temple is there for. It's actually to spread the teachings of the Buddha, of kindness and truth and friendliness and forgiveness. So if we allow those important things to be damaged, then they truly are flushing Buddhism down the toilet. And no one can do that, only you can do that. So that's my answer. That's like a bit of creative thinking, just by being still and peaceful. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Ajahn, sometimes it is, although we know we're supposed to forgive,
Yeah.
but what is hard is to actually forgive.
Okay. If it's hard to forgive, you have to learn how to forgive. So like anything else in life, it comes from practice, training. You get encouragement from forgiveness experts like myself, all for free. Because recently, just because there's a monk who was leaving to go off to the United States, there's usually a tradition in Buddhist monasticism, when somebody leaves, they ask forgiveness of their teacher. And so straight away I said, I forgive you, for anything you may have said, done, or thought, intentional or unintentional, for the 3 time zones. Now I added that because that's not original Buddhism. This is an Ajahn Brahm innovation. So I said, I forgive you for everything which was said, done, or thought in the past, in the present, or in the future. So you don't have to bother me with all this again. You're already forgiven. And I give that to you as well. I give you all forgiveness in the 3 time zones, whatever you do, say and think, intentional or unintentional, which harms or hurts me, in the past, the present, or in the future, until the end of this eon, I forgive you. So you can do whatever you want, you're already forgiven. Now do that to your husband. Say, look, darling, I don't care what you do, say, or think, intentional or unintentional, I give you pre-forgiveness. Understand you're already forgiven.
What if he's cheated on you?
It's forgive you. It says past, I forgive you. Because you can flush sort of the, what is it? You know, you can flush that little business down the toilet, but you're not going to flush your love down the toilet. The higher ideals of a marriage, which is going to say to that little being, which you partner, look, I'm going to stay with you for life. Don't care what you do. I'm going to be your supporter, your friend, your mate. If you make a mistake, you already have my forgiveness because my love is greater than that. If you could do that, and if you really meant it, that partner would not dare do anything which harmed or hurt someone like you. And you all know that came from my own father, who told me, son, the door of my heart will always be open to you, no matter what you ever do in your life, son. I'll always be your father, I will always love you, no matter what you do. When he told me that, some of my mates at school were getting involved in drugs. One of the reasons I never got involved in drugs in that time, in a high school in West London in the late 60s, was I didn't want to harm my dad. Anyone who trusted me that much, I can't hurt someone like that. No way. When I went to jail to teach, there was this one occasion where several visitors to this top security jail in Western Australia had been attacked, very badly beaten, and even raped. And just because you were a man didn't matter, they would rape you as well. Some of the prisoners had such long sentences it didn't matter. They're going to die in jail. What's the point? You can do whatever you like. You can't punish, there's no further punishment. So, because of the danger of visitors being attacked, there was a new security system that had just been installed in this prison. I was given a pen. And they said, this is not really a pen for writing, this is a security alarm. They pointed out, you see all these what look like smoke detectors on the ceiling. They're not smoke detectors, these are alarms. If you get attacked, take the pen, press the top, aim it at one of these detectors, the alarm will go off, we'll know exactly where you are, we'll come and protect you. And they said, put it in your jacket pocket. And straight away I said, oh, come on. You see me, I haven't got a jacket, I haven't even got a pocket. And they said, oh, put it whatever you want. So I just and they said, but don't tell the prisoners, it's a secret. We don't want them to know. So I went in there just holding it. And as soon as I came into my meditation class, the first words the prisoners said were, oh, so you've got one of those security devices as well. They all knew exactly what it was. But then one of the prisoners, he became a really good friend. He's a great guy. He was one of the leaders. For those of you who know that story about the levitation, he was actually the one who asked the question, can you levitate by meditating? But this particular prisoner came up to me and he said, Brahm, do you really think that you could even get your finger to the button of that pen before we jumped you? And now these are tough guys. And I looked at him, I said, no, probably not. He said, correct. We could get to you and rape you before you even thought about that. But then he looked at me. He said, but if any of those guys tried it, I get to them first. We like you. You're safe. And that's why in this jail, which was very violent, I felt so safe at all times. I mean that. My security system was just kindness. I'm not just saying that just as trying to be religious. If you are kind to other people, really are selfless, and just really are gentle, other people protect you. They can't see you harmed. They just won't do it. Even sometimes I've been in situations in Australia about to be punched. Other monks have been in situations in the Bronx, in New York. We had these hoodlums come up to them. They can't be harmed or hurt. Just some of these monks are just too soft and kind, and you just can't do it. So sometimes that kindness, that softness, that is what protects you. So that's why you don't really need to learn such self-defense. If you have really heaps and heaps of loving kindness, and really do have compassion, and do have this acceptance of another person. So this comes back to what I said in the beginning here. If your partner, you give them that degree of loving kindness and metta, you'll find that there are times when they will cheat on you will get less and less if they happen at all. If you don't trust them, then they will cheat. If you trust them, really trust them, and forgive them, their cheating will get less and less and less, if it happens at all. Why do they want to cheat? Why is it they prefer someone else than you? What's wrong with you? It must be that somewhere inside there they're missing something. And what they're missing is this beautiful connection between us, which says, at least there's one person in my life who I can feel so relaxed with, so at home with. I know whatever I do, they'll always love me and care for me. That unconditional loving kindness is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. It's incredible how it can heal, how it can heal marriages. So if your partner has cheated on you, this would be my advice, whether you've got the guts to follow it or not. Say, darling, I forgive you. If you cheat again, I will forgive you again. I don't know how many times you cheat on me, I'll always forgive you. Try it. Just take that step into what is completely irrational, but inspirational. Try it.
That's going to take a lot of courage.
Yeah. Courage is the most important part of any relationship. You know, when you meet another person, you get married. Somebody told me this, I haven't checked it out, but the word marriage comes from a Latin word which also means to gamble. Because when you commit yourself to somebody else, you think you know the person you're marrying, but you never do. You'll be always learning who that person is for the rest of your life. And it's a gamble. But it's a gamble if it pays off, which is wonderful. And it's a gamble, it's a trial, which you can learn so much from. And if you have some good advice and good encouragement, it's amazing what you can do. You can be inspirational. You can work together. You can solve those problems.
Ajahn Brahm, once I heard that in your absence there was a monk who visited your monastery and stayed there. And this visiting monk was not keeping to the rules of the Vinaya code. As a result, whoever was in charge then packed his bag and threw him out of the monastery. Is that something that you have done? Because it's like us packing our, whoever's bag and throw it out and said, all right, you no longer live here.
But usually that in a monastery I don't have the final say. It is a democracy and I get outvoted. And I love that when I do get outvoted, because like a family, there's nobody who is the head of a family. A family is a group. We work together, and so it has to be a joint decision. So sometimes I disagree with what the other monks decide. But if the monks decide that, I'll always work with that, and I'll do that. It happened, anyone who visits my monastery sees our main hall. The story behind that main hall is as follows. At that particular time I was number 2 monk, but I was the main builder of the monastery. I learnt how to lay bricks and put roofs on. And I worked very, very hard labouring. Really hands-on work in all aspects of building in that monastery. But when it came time for our main hall in our monastery, the abbot wanted to be built one way, I wanted to be built another way. I thought the abbot's plan was completely impractical, expensive, it wouldn't work, and it was absolutely stupid. So we had an argument. I had a bad argument with the abbot of this monastery about 3 or 4 days. I'm not perfect, I had to learn, like everybody else. But after 3 or 4 days of having this terrible argument with another monk, I literally came to my senses. So what am I doing this for? It does not matter what a monastery looks like. What's important in a monastery is the people. People are more important than buildings. It's much better to have a monastery where people are living in harmony, which is completely a mess, than having this beautiful monastery of chandeliers and gold and very expensive and lots of marbles where the monks or the nuns are arguing every day. So I went up to that monk, the abbot, and I asked forgiveness. I mean, I really meant it. I said, look, I'm sorry that I've had an argument with you. And I asked for a favour. He was actually quite touched. And I said, can I ask for 2 favours? First of all, can we build it your way? That's favour number 1. And number 2, can you let me be the builder? And my name is on the building licence of that main hall. I built it, his way. I still think it was a stupid way of building, but I may be wrong. But the point was that I really wanted to do something to overcome my ideas and my views. And I did that, and it took about 2 years to build that place, and I put so much energy and effort into building that. And I wanted to build it the very, very best, as strong, as beautiful as I possibly could, his way. Now I felt so proud of that I did something like that. So if you want harmony in your marriage, ask, if you're a wife, ask your husband, what does he want? And say, I'll do it your way. And I'll go even further. I'll put more extra effort, double effort in doing it your way. If it's the other way around. So the husband saying to the wife, which way do you want it to be done? I'll do it your way. Sometimes that takes courage and guts to do that. It's such a beautiful way of living a life. So what happens now, because I've told that story, and sometimes the arguments we have at our monastery these days is do it your way. No, you do it your way. No, I insist, your way. No. We did it my way last time, your way this We have this playing around in our monastery. People are just giving all the time. They're giving out, and it's a crazy monastery to live in, but it's very playful.
Ajahn Brahm, someone had wanted me to ask this question because in Singapore there has been quite a few cases of maid abuse, and having a maid at home with us, it's a very common thing. And some people end up changing maids like 7 times in 4 years, sort of thing, and maids get abused at home. So, I mean, do you think that this is a case of, people just not respecting the maid, or it's just expecting too much, and how should people treat the maids?
It's actually, it's a relationship problem. You have a maid, you have the family. They're part of the household, so there's a relationship there. They're not part of the family as such. They're a maid, they're employed. They're not the same as the children or the wife, but they're part of things. And so you've got a goal here to cooperate. You've got to work together. You've got to go and earn enough money to pay her. She's got to do her jobs and duties. And so it's that cooperation thing which we have to have. And so we have to actually learn, if there is a problem, it's not the maid's problem. It's our problem. Look, what's the problem here? You're not cleaning up properly. So you find out what the problem is, and it's not her problem. If it's her problem, you've got to change. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And sometimes we miss out what the problem truly is. She may be just too tired. It may be too much work for her. Or maybe you need to sort of adjust the work. It's part of the Buddha's teachings. In Sigalawada Sutta, for those of you who've read that, which is if you have employees, you have to give them work according to their abilities, what they can actually do. So if you have a maid, find out what she's capable of doing, how she's capable of doing it, and give her work according to her abilities. Obviously that she has her duties to try and work as hard as she possibly can. And there must be something wrong with the employers if they can never find a good maid. Because many of the maids, obviously, they want to have a stable job. They want actually to be in the same family instead of shopping and changing all around. Obviously, there'll be a few maids who are lazy and don't know how to work properly, but they shouldn't really last all that long in the system. But the majority of maids, I'm sure, really want to do the best thing by the employer and giving a good chance and giving respect and giving help. They will do the best. I've got a piece of paper on my wall at my hut in Australia. There was a company in United Kingdom who won an award for best business practice, who got that award because they stopped overtime. They banned it. And once they banned overtime, productivity soared through the roof. Their profits went up as well. And this is why they won the prize. And they asked the managing director, what's going on there? And he said, look, before we asked for so much overtime from our employees. They're getting so stressed out. They weren't having a proper family life. And they were taking sick leave. They weren't working all that hard. Because we were asking so much of them, they didn't really feel like they wanted to contribute to the company. They never worked harder. They were always surly to the customers because they were upset. And they had a high staff turnover. As soon as they banned it, you just could not do it. After your 40-hour week, you went home. And even if you worked without pay, no, you go home. They were sent home. And as a result of that, they realized the bosses actually cared for the welfare of the ordinary workers. So the workers actually wanted to work in this place. When they realized how the CEOs actually cared for them, they worked harder. And they were happier, which meant their customers felt this was a happy company. People were being kind. It was a good company. So they got more business. Staff turnover just almost vanished. Nobody wanted to leave. Productivity went up, sales went up, became an incredibly successful company. And just from a simple thing like banning overtime, but it wasn't just banning overtime, it was just showing that people cared. So if you have a maid problem, have you showed her you care? If you really care about her welfare, maybe there's a time she needs to go off and see her sick mother in the Philippines or whatever. Buy her the ticket and send her off with some money. And she'll come back and work harder for you. Maybe that's one of the problems. We're exploiting the relationship rather than putting in this relationship some care, some kindness, some compassion. So instead of what I can get out of this person, we're in it together. It's a household. You need a maid. So it's an us problem. It's not a her problem, not a me problem. It's an us problem again.
To reverse that, Ajahn Brahm, what if you have a boss from hell? Or for some people, a mother-in-law from hell?
If you have a mother-in-law from hell again, it certainly is an us problem. So if you have a mother-in-law a mother-in-law problem, again, it's a problem which does need to be solved. And if it's at all possible, if it's a mother-in-law problem, that's a bit more difficult, simply because by the time they're mother-in-law, they're so old anyway, it's very hard to change. Sometimes you just have to wait for a while until they... But anyhow, again, those problems, see where they're coming from, because mother-in-laws are still too possessive of their children, still my son rather than like our family. So one of the best things is to drag your mother-in-law over to a talk at the Buddhist Lodge, or leave her some of the tapes or the talks. Because sometimes these teachings, they inspire people. And this was not a mother-in-law problem, this was a husband problem in Perth, because I'm not sure it was a Singaporean girl or a Malaysian girl, she was married to an Australian man. And she liked to go to the temple to listen to the Dhamma, but her husband would never go. And every time she tried to give him a book or a tape, he would just, that's stupid stuff. He was like a down-to-earth Australian man. So she came to see me, and I said, look, your approach is all wrong. You have to use, with husbands, just a little bit of psychology. It's not that hard. Tell your husbands, keep your hands off my books. So he read the book, and now he comes every week. It's obvious when you can see what to do. So if you've got a mother-in-law problem, just keep some of these books around and tell her, you keep your hands off these books, okay? Because of course, well, you can't tell me that. So they read the books and maybe they might understand something. Same as the boss from hell problem. Sometimes the people who are, the boss from hell are they're usually afraid, maybe of their position. They're trying so hard to advance their own careers. If you can actually tell them, look, boss from hell, we are a team. If you're going to come from hell, I'm going to have to come from hell too. It's very infectious, this hell business. So isn't it much better for everybody if we work together? Teamwork, cooperation. And it actually works. Bosses from hell, they usually stress out so much themselves. They usually die of coronaries or they don't last very long. So maybe, I shouldn't be saying this, maybe get them really upset so the coronary comes earlier, but perhaps that's not a good thing for a monk to say. But no, a lot of times they've got their own little problems in life and they want things to be done. So you say that we've all got the same goal in our office to actually get this project done. But look, if you want this project done, sort of encouragement is much more powerful than force and shouting at me. Because if we work out of fear, which is a lot of time the boss from hell installs fear, then fear doesn't work all that well as a motivator. All it teaches you to do is actually to work when the boss is watching, and when he's not watching, not to work. That was actually just like in the Singapore schools. You had the cane in the school that I grew up in. All I learned from the fear of the cane was not to get caught. I never learned what was right and wrong. I just learned how to be more devious, so the teacher never saw me when I was misbehaving. So fear taught me to be more devious, not to be good. But some other people encouraged me why you should be good, why you should not be a boss from hell, why you should be sort of a little bit more understanding and motivating, not through fear, but through the common good, the common goal. Because if the company folds up, then I lose my job too. If the project goes ahead, you get your promotion, I get my promotion, we all win. So if we can locate that common goal, that common purpose, then it's a common working together. Maybe that's a few suggestions.
Thank you for that, Ajahn Brahm. I think I've grilled you enough for 2 hours.
I was just getting into it.
Is there anyone from the floor who would like to ask a question that perhaps I didn't have a chance to cover? Anyone at all?
Yes, we've
Yes,
got a question
Susan.
from Susan. Great. You can always rely on a question from Susan. Thank you. What will we do without Susan?
Thank you.
And Susan always really asks really great questions. That's true.
Wait,
Just-
it
just
works
go.
now. Thank you. I must live up to my name. What pressure is this? Anyway, thank you, Ajahn Brahm, for yet another enlightening talk. I have, okay, make it fast. I have one quick jokes to share.
Joke?
Very fast. Joke, yes.
Okay,
Do you
great.
like that?
So speak loudly because jokes are important.
Yeah, okay. Okay, this joke is about a husband and wife. So the wife was complaining, saying, I was a fool when I married you. So the husband looked at her, she said, yeah, I was so much in love that I didn't notice that. Okay, that aside, I got two questions.
That's a good joke. Quick while you're ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I thought it's both sharing. Thank you for giving me the time and the floor. Okay, now I forget the question. Okay, I recall already. Okay, my first question itself is, just now it says that, just like the title of your great book, opening your heart. No matter what you do, your Father will open the heart to you. So I'm saying that this statement itself is redundant for people who are kind-hearted, who are good, because they will not take advantage. But if you meet unscrupulous people, then this is not going to work, because you'll make yourself very vulnerable, no matter what they do, and at their mercy. Can you comment?
Okay, you do leave yourself very vulnerable when you actually open your heart to somebody else. But anyone who's got married knows that any relationship is actually a gift of vulnerability to the other person. Life makes you very vulnerable, and to feel makes you vulnerable. And vulnerability is part of life. And those people who try to be invulnerable, who try and be like an island, who try and put their heart in a concrete bunker, they will never feel pain, but they'll never feel happiness either. So sometimes that the path of letting go of attachments, the Buddhist path, is actually to let go into insecurity. As a monk, I got very vulnerable. Even I don't know literally where my next meal is coming from, who will feed me. When I went to Australia, I was very vulnerable, literally wearing girls' clothes, a skirt, in Australia. I was very vulnerable, just giving up my career and all my money to be a monk, because I had no money left at all. Even now I'm very vulnerable because I have no superannuation, no pension. It's wonderful to be vulnerable. Because when you really have some trust in goodness, which is actually what religious life should really be. It should be actually learning how just to be vulnerable. And actually some people will take advantage of you. But I'd rather have that and have some people abusing me, taking advantage of me, than the other way around. I'd rather feel a few hits, a few punches, than actually just always be running away from people.
Okay, thank you very much. My second question is, okay, regarding whether be it family, domestic disputes or that of office politics, I find that sometimes when there's a quarrel or when there's some disagreement, some people unwittingly, they like to take sides without having an idea what the quarrel is about. So do you have comments, and how do you tell these people to hands off diplomatically?
No, it's good fun taking sides in the quarrel. But sometimes don't take the quarrels too seriously. You know, it's a quarrel, it's just a little quarrel. Because sometimes, just for with that previous abbot of my monastery, just sometimes for fun, he would say something absolutely ridiculous, and I'd take the opposite side, just for a little bit of an argument. It's just almost like a game. But because we were friends, we would know, even though we'd be quite forceful with our arguments, our friendship was more important. And I recall at the time when I was a student, You go to the pub in England with your friends because that's the meeting place where you would go. And sometimes you'd have these fierce arguments at each other on political issues or other issues, and you'd be shouting at each other. But we'd always remember, that was my friend there, because he could understand I could shout at him, and it was just getting excited, that's all. And in the end, they'd say, okay, enough now. We'd sort of, okay, my turn to pay for the next drink. And we'd always actually finish with friendship. So sometimes if there is an argument, have that argument, but always make sure that we finish off in friendship. That's the most important. What happens in the middle is not so important. So we start in friendship, we have the argument, we always finish off in friendship. But when people actually take sides, sometimes it's okay, because actually you can listen to what they're saying, and actually maybe they can contribute to the solution. Because if maybe taking sides, it's because it is their problem as well, and they want to contribute. But the best side to take is the middle side. It's the old joke of what is the sweetest side of an apple? What's the sweetest side of an apple? The inside.
Oh, the inside.
So as far as the inside is the sweetest part of things. So what's in between us?
Okay.
Does that sort of answer the question, or not really? No, I'll say it if you think it.
A little, but I find that sometimes it depends on the other party, because some are just in for fun, so they just join up without understanding what is it all about.
That's right, yes. And have you ever been one of those?
What do you think?
Yeah, of course you have.
Ajahn.
Well, it's true. Why do we do that? It's because we always like to interfere. And we think that we can actually solve the problem. That we have the solution. We know what's right for everybody else. So a little bit of humility is always very, very good. And to understand that sometimes we don't know. And so sometimes it's best actually to not join the argument, but actually to find a space in the middle. Be the umpire, be the mediators. There's many people who want to join the football side on either end, but there's only one umpire or one referee. And actually we need more referees. But you be the referee, the one who actually delights in harmony, who actually hears what that person's saying, hears what the other side is saying, and see if you can find some sort of space in between where they can all meet. So don't take sides, take the inside. In other words, be the mediator. That's the best side to take. The sweetest side of an apple is the inside.
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to... Yeah, come on. You can use this mic as well.
Good evening, Ajahn.
Evening.
Okay, so a problem can be solved if both parties are willing to come together to find a solution. What if one party refuses to change? And another question is, I find it very difficult to cultivate patience towards my enemy. So, is there any other ways to cultivate patience? Thank you.
Okay, first of all, sometimes in an argument, that's one of the sides won't change. Is that side your side? If it is, then you change. So the old saying goes, if you can't beat them, join them. Because sometimes, which is most important? Is it always the other person has to change? Because we always say, that other person, they won't change, they won't change, they won't change. And they come up to me and say, because they're the other party, say, the other party won't change, they won't change, they won't change. And I can see something there that obviously that if they won't change, you change. Like when that argument I had with that senior monk in my monastery. He wouldn't change, he wanted the hall to be built his way. And I wouldn't change, I wanted to be built my way. And so the only solution to that problem was, I will change. So if the other person won't change, then you change. You be the first one. And I'll guarantee you something. If you're the first person who change, you will be the winner. certainly spiritually, karmically, you'll be the peacemaker. Because you understand the argument's not getting anywhere, the problem is just ruining our relationship, the company, the family can't move forward, so I will change. If you show that degree of humility, sometimes it embarrasses the other person. They think, oh, well, hang on a minute, maybe you were right in a few things as well. But you make that first move to change. And what the other thing was about, it's hard to forgive your enemy. Okay, it is because you have to see something in your enemy which is beautiful, which is kind. It was a weird thing for me when I saw some of my enemies when I was a young man, and I found out other people liked them. So how can you like someone like that? Now think of your worst enemy, the one who's really been cruel to you, very mean to you, has cheated you, maybe robbed you of much money. I mean, they probably have someone who loves them dearly. It's crazy, isn't it? How can actually, say, for example, Osama bin Laden, responsible for killing so many people? He has sons who love him dearly. How can they do that? You find every enemy, every terrible person in this world has other people who see something which you just cannot see in them. So your job with your enemy is actually to try and see them as one of their friends sees them. If you can do that, then the problem is 90% solved. It's on its way to solution. If you can't be patient with them, it means you want them to change. But it's not really you want them to change. You have to change the way you see them. Don't want them to change. Just what's between you and them. Your attitude, your relation, the way you see them. Get that to change first. Make sense?
Is there anyone else who would like to bring
Yes,
up
it's
your
Christina here.
please?
2 questions. Yeah,
After-
great. It's warming up. It's getting hot.
Ajahn Brahm,
Yeah.
you mentioned let go,
Yeah.
let it go just now. Could you enlighten us what actually you mean by letting go? Right, thank you.
Okay. Somebody reminded me, that's actually Richard Lim reminded us of this at lunchtime. It's an old story which I said a long time ago. This is one of Ajahn Chah's stories. How heavy is this bottle of water? It's actually quite light to start off with. If I keep holding it like this, so after about 5 or 10 minutes, it will start to feel heavy. If I keep holding this like this for half an hour, I start to probably ache. If I'm still holding it like this for 2 or 3 hours, I'll be in great pain and a very stupid monk. When it starts to get heavy, what should I do? Put it down, yeah. It's easy. I don't have to throw it away. I'm not being irresponsible. I just put it down for a few seconds. And when I pick it up again, actually it worked again, it feels lighter. This is an experiment you can do at home if you like. Don't ever say that Buddhism is not scientific. Get a glass of water, hold it for 2 or 3 minutes until it gets heavy, put it down for maybe 1 minute, pick it up again, you'll find it was much lighter. Now, of course, you can understand what I mean by this. This is your problems, responsibilities, worries, duties, whatever it is. The reason why people have too much stress in our world is not because what they have to do is too much work. It doesn't matter how heavy this bottle is, that's not the point. It's because we don't know how to put it down from time to time when it feels heavy. So I carry a huge burden as spiritual director of the, patron of the Buddhist Fellowship. I'm the abbot of a big monastery, 3 monasteries in Perth, spiritual director of the Buddhist Society of West Australia, spiritual director of the Buddhist Society of South Australia, spiritual advisor of whatever it is, of Buddhist Society of Victoria, spiritual director of Chittabawana Hermitage in New South Wales, spiritual patron of Bodhi Kusama Hermitage, spiritual patron of the Dhamma Kurbok Foundation, and I just got myself another role, Santi Monastery as well, and I just told you about this Australia Sangha Association.
President.
Chairman. Chairmonk of the Australia Sangha Association. I've got all this stuff which I'm supposed to do, so I really work hard. When I carry this burden, so when it gets too much, I put it down and have a meditation, relax. This is how you do a lot of work, how you take on lots of responsibility. When it gets too much in your office, take 5 minutes, time out, and rest, relax. When you go home at night, you've got lots of work to do. Rest and have dinner with your family first. Because we find if you rest first of all, when you pick up the burden afterwards, you're fresh, you're relaxed, you're clear, you are efficient. The problem with people who don't succeed in business and life is not they have to do too much, but they do it in a very inefficient way. When they're really tired, they keep pushing, which means they make lots of mistakes, they're not clear, they don't produce very much when they're tired. So the best thing to do when you're tired, rest, for goodness sake. Put it down for a few minutes, have a good rest, enjoy a meal with your family, have a game of golf or relax with some music or whatever it is, meditate, then pick up your burden afterwards. You're ready to do it. And your mind will enjoy it more. Because it enjoys it more, you can actually do much more. So that's what letting go is all about. Putting down your burden from time to time.
Yes, please.
Hello. I just want to have this question because I have a friend, very interesting. He said something to me. He said that, I forgive my husband too long. I forgive him so many times that I suffer so much. Yeah. So in the end, they actually divorced and she become more happy. So, I mean, the things I see in life is that there's always between about giving and also, like what you say, how do you strike a balance in life?
Okay, you're saying that that friend of yours forgave her husband. Obviously, she didn't forgive him. She just said, I forgive you, but she never really. That husband of mine, he did this, he did that. So she carried it around with him. That's probably one of the reasons why the relationship never lasted. It wasn't real forgiveness. It wasn't real love. So it's incredible. If you do really forgive, really forgiving, it's very, very powerful. If someone actually, if you've done something, well, there's a good case of that when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, run by Desmond Tutu. And many of you have read some of the transcripts of what happened there. The apartheid regime in South Africa was responsible for some horrendous crimes. And there were so many of them that Nelson Mandela, one of the wisest men alive today, decided that retribution was not going to help their country. And but they couldn't just ignore all the crimes. There had to be some sort of closure from people whose husbands had been killed, whose wives had been raped, and people had been tortured. They had to do something. They couldn't just say, okay, leave it all alone, let's forget about it and move on. So they had this very innovative mechanism called the Truth and Reconciliation Council, which other countries have imitated, where they asked any perpetrators of crimes, murders or whatever, to come forward, and if they actually recounted in this forum honestly, with contrition, exactly what they've done, they would get amnesty. So some of these people were going up, some of the secret police officers, the white police officers, the soldiers, and saying the crimes they'd done against the black Africans. On one of these wonderful occasions, which when I read it really sort of moved me very, very much, was where I think one of the secret police officers, an Afrikaans, white man, just said just how he had tortured and eventually killed this black African who was his wife was in there listening to him all the time, in tears at what had happened to her husband and how he'd been mistreated and tortured so cruelly and eventually killed. And he recounted that, trembling in front of her. At the end of his testimony, before he could truly break down, she ran up to him and gave him this incredible hug and said, I forgive you. And that was so moving because of the amount she had to forgive. Her husband, just for no real crime, no real reason, had been treated in the most demeaning, cruel, painful manner. And she could still find it in her heart, that sort of that leap of spiritual truth, to go up to that man, the torturer and murderer of her husband, and give him a hug and a sincere kiss. I forgive. That's moving. That can be done. And if you do something like that, it is a classic win-win situation. The woman gets closure, and that man who did that crime gets the start of his healing process. So if it's real forgiveness, it's always a positive outcome. The trouble is, a lot of times people think, I'm a Buddhist, I'm supposed to forgive. I'm a member of the Buddhist fellowship. Well, imagine I'm not supposed to forgive. I don't want to forgive, but I have to forgive. Okay, I forgive you. And of course, that never works because it's not real forgiveness. The real forgiveness is an act, a leap of courage, a leap of the heart, which says, you have hurt me. You've been unfaithful. Maybe you never know how much pain that is and how difficult that is. But I really forgive you.
Okay, but one interesting she told me was that you say, I forgive him, but I will not live with him.
Not live with him, yeah.
And I don't know, one thing I will find is that, is it better that you don't really, it's true that society don't encourage divorce, but isn't it really better because now the husband's more happy, the ex-wife is more happy.
Yeah, it's like when you lose your job or you resign from your job, and the next Monday morning you're much more happy because you don't have to go to work that morning. But when the bills start coming in, then you're not happy at all. So sometimes when they get divorced, it's just like the end of a problem, but then there's more problems going to come next. There's no real solution. It's the old Band-Aid solution. So there's a big problem in all societies now. The divorce rate is going up. And that's all societies, all governments realize that is a huge social problem. You ask the kids. A long time ago, a kid asked me, he said, look, I need a mother and a father, about 5 years old. I said, why? Oh, when my mother scolds me, I've got another parent to run to. That's what they said to me. And kids do need two parents. And why is there just so many divorces going on in the world? And again, I don't think people aren't trying hard enough. Sure, I agree with you, there are some cases where divorce is the only option. It really just is incompatible. There's a big mistake made in the coming together, those two people. But I think there's too many divorces. I'm not saying divorce is evil and it should never be done. You should stick together no matter what. But I think we could try harder to accommodate ourselves to other people. Because
Actually,
you can
my
divorce your partner, but you can't divorce from other people in this world. This is actually one of the great things of our world. The religions are coming together, the nations are coming together, we're going to each other's countries. We can't divorce from our neighbors anymore.
What is a good indication of you have tried enough or that you have not tried enough?
When you're dead, you know you've tried enough.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think we should probably give Ajahn Brahm some time to rest tonight because there's going to be an early flight to Bangkok in the morning. So I think on behalf of everyone here, the Buddhist Fellowship and the Buddhist Lodge, I'd like to thank Ajahn Brahm for that very insightful dialogue to give us a lot of inspiration. So perhaps we'll do it the Singapore way. Let's give him a round of applause.